Before we get into this episode, there's something that might be of interest that I wanted to tell you about. Scene and Heard, who run this podcast, have been asked by Scotland Food and Drink to undertake a strategic review of the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. Now, these Excellence Awards have been going for almost 20 years and are a huge mainstay of the food and drink sector. But it's time to ensure that they're still relevant. So if you have ever been involved in the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards, or even if you've ever had an opinion about them, we would love for you, please, to complete our survey. So if you go to the On Farm Twitter, which is at @on_farm UK, and click the link in the bio, there will be a tab in there that will take you to the survey, and it should only take you a very short while to complete, but we would be enormously grateful. Hello and welcome to On Farm. It's Anna back with you again this week, and at the moment spring is very much in the air, and one of my favourite things about spring, apart from the Easter eggs, is flowers. I just loved seeing the daffodils and the tulips and the crocuses all come through the ground and see the colour that they exhibit. It's just amazing. So we thought it would be quite a good opportunity this week to bring you a podcast that's all about flowers. So I am speaking to Barbara from Corrimony Farm, who specialises in growing Scottish flowers and then sells them to florists, wholesalers and to the general public through an online subscription service. So I was at home on Zoom when I spoke to Barbara, but she took a microphone and went outside into her polytunnels and indeed into the garden. So you might hear some background tractor noises and the typical noises that you might hear on a flower farm. So I hope you enjoy. Just sit back and relax and listen and hear Barbara's wonderful story.
I've come out of the polytunnel and I'm in what is the outside part of the flower patch, which is essentially a part of my garden. So that's over there, and then we kind of looking out. We look down Glenurquhart over to behind us over the back. It goes down into Glenafric. It's really lovely. Like, we've got lovely scenery, especially when you're up at Buntate actually, because it looks right down the glen and right kind of up over Glenafric. So it's really stunning. So I'm Barbara. I farm about 25 miles west of Inverness with my husband David. We have 3 children, so I spend a lot of my time between flower farming, actual farming and looking after the children. We have diversified the farm in the last 5 years to grow pumpkins and sunflowers, so we have events twice a year. The most recent diversification has been the Wild Acre, which is our flower farming enterprise, which is mostly me, but is growing.
Brilliant, and that's mostly what I would love to talk to you about today, if that's okay, for a few reasons. One of which is that I am obsessed with flowers. I love them. I try and grow them, not nearly as successfully as you, but I love to have a vase full in the kitchen. But also, I'm always fascinated to hear stories of people who have diversified what might have once been a traditional farm into something a bit different. And I'm also, like many people, completely passionate about all things Scottish, so I'd far rather be eating Scottish strawberries and Scottish potatoes than those coming from overseas, and I think the same applies to flowers. Sure. I'd much rather have Scottish flowers in my vase, and that's kind of, I suppose, one of the reasons why you started. Would that be right? Because the kind of the need and the demand for Scottish flowers.
I guess we probably started at both good and bad times. We needed to raise money we wanted to raise money for a charity in Glasgow. One of our children were sick and he stayed in hospital for a while, and we stayed in accommodation down there. And because of that, we came home, we decided I had 2 very young children at the time, hadn't had the third yet. At that point, I was probably considering giving up my job, formerly a teacher, and it was in a bit of a quandary, because when Angus was ill, I was actually working at the time, and there was a few days at the start of that illness where I went to work because it was easier for David to take the time off than it was for me. Yeah. And I suppose that guilt still runs a bit deep. But over the course of his illness, there was a lot of thought went on about giving up work. Do I really need to be working? And could we work it so that I was just at home, which is the traditional way, I suppose, in farming. But we're not that traditional here, and even David's parents weren't that traditional, so it was kind of a bit of a big step. But anyway, there was a bit of thought about growing other things, and flowers was the one thing that, like you, I absolutely love them, and I don't know who doesn't.
Yeah, well, quite, that's true.
Yeah, and then once I started growing more and more, the first year I grew them just to sort of give away as gifts for friends, when you go visiting someone, and more so the older I get, the more I feel, it actually, maybe because I'm sometimes can be disorganised, and you go to visit a friend, and on the way there you think, I'm going to have to factor in stopping by a shop to get them something to take, to say thank you for having me or whatever. And now, that first year was amazing because I just went out to the garden, cut some flowers, took them, and they were well received, so that was pretty cool. So and then here we are, we're 3 seasons down the road, and we're just kind of developing as we go. It started off quite small. We did have a polytunnel before the flowers kicked off, but I never grew anything in it, and the cover actually came off it. And at that time, this was kind of I think that was pre-pumpkins, and I said, I'm not even really sure we want to keep that. I think we might just get rid of it. But it was a tunnel that had been there for quite a number of years and decades probably, and it's one of those things, you don't really want to be the one that rips it down.
Yes.
So we bought a new sheet and we put it on, and then when we recovered it, it was an absolutely ideal place for the children to play in during winter. So all the garden toys went in there, and I'm sure that my friends cursed me actually when they came to visit, because all the children would go out and they would play in the mud. And it was great. They loved it. We had a little polytunnel, but we've reinstated that now for growing, and then we now have a bigger polytunnel, and it's still a small polytunnel in relation to commercial growing, but it's definitely bigger than what we had, and that enables me to extend the growing season a bit, particularly the start of the season, and then the back end of the season in November. We still had quite a lot of flowers going, where all the other ones outside had started to die off.
Yeah. So I think you're in one of the polytunnels at the moment speaking to me, aren't you? Can you describe for us a little bit what it looks like now? Because as you said, at first it didn't have a sheet on it. Well, years ago it grew vegetables, then it didn't have a sheet on it, then it was full of toy tractors and kids' toys. What does it look like now?
So the one I'm standing at the moment is actually the new one that we only put up in, what did we put it up in? 2 years ago. It's been here for 2 years now. So at the moment it's looking very tidy. We've been working very hard this winter to get all the winter jobs done. You come into the tunnel at the top, and either side we have workbenches for potting and propagators for growing from seed, because we grow almost everything from seed.
Wow.
So we've got some propagators, which means I can sow things at this time of year I don't have to use the house, is the answer actually, because I have for years used the windowsills and things, and it annoys the other occupants of my house more than it annoys me. Which is ironic given that it's me that does the cleaning, but anyway. So now I'm able to grow everything in the greenhouse, between the greenhouse and the polytunnel. And then down the polytunnel we've got, this year we made an effort to whip up 3/4 of the bed covers, because it's just directly into the ground here. We did have raised beds in here for the first year, but we found that there was a lot of problems with them, and they just really weren't the most efficient way of growing, because they looked lovely, but they looked lovely when they were freshly planted and not very weedy, but then once the weeds started coming up, we still use membrane to keep the weeds suppressed, but before it still gets through it. So it just wasn't the most efficient way of growing. So we whipped them out last year, and we now have 3 or 5 beds going right the way down the polytunnel with kind of narrow alleyways, and 4 out of the 5 beds are currently covered because we redunged them this year with dung from our cattle, and they got covered for winter, so they're kind of just hopefully working away, improving the soil under there at the moment. And then on the very right hand side we've got some perennial type stuff. So we've got Alstromira that are in there that did really well last year. I'm not really sure they're going to stay in here, but they are still there for now. And we have some quite sad looking chrysanthemums, which the jury's out on what we do with them at the moment, because they are looking like they're coming back, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea to have them in here or what we do with them. So we might move them. We'll see.
I suppose it's maybe a little unfair because I'm speaking to you in February, and it's probably not the best time of year to be speaking to a flower farmer and asking her to describe what she sees.
I know. I mean, it's probably a difficult one because it's the time of year I have probably the most time to chat. But yeah, it's not very easy on the eye this time of year.
No. The other thing that's striking me from the conversation is, and I think this is fabulous, but I'm curious about the detail of it. You know, you've talked about how, you know, you've been going for 3 years now, and you've kind of learned that the raised beds weren't ideal, and you've tried other things, and you're making your mind up about the chrysanthemums and things like that. But yeah, I'm really kind of curious as to how, you know, have you learnt all of this on the job? You know, it is a skill. Growing flowers, as I've learnt, doesn't just happen. You know, it's a skill, and there's lots of trial and error. Have you learnt the whole thing on the job, or have you been on any courses? Are you an avid reader? You know, how have you kind of learnt the trade, as it were?
I think it's I did some courses in the business of selling flowers, and it was basically an online course where it's actually 3 flower growers from across the UK who have been doing it for years and years and are really highly qualified, and they've got a tremendous course where prior to lockdown maybe you could do some in-person visits, but now it's all online, and for me that worked perfectly well. And it meant that from October right the way through to March, you basically did loads of reading, and you had like tasks to do. It was really good because you actually got made part of a social media group, and then when the season started, obviously all the online sort of commitments stopped because everyone was too busy, but you then were made part of this group. So even though you didn't ask any questions yourself, almost every day there would be a question that someone would ask on that group that you were thinking about asking, you just hadn't kind of got around to doing it. So it was fantastic, and I learned so much from them. And other than that, I don't have any growing qualification or anything like that. I have I have a business degree. That's about the only thing that might be useful. And actually it's a lot more useful. Yeah, it's a lot more useful now than I must admit I thought it would be when I did it. I'm sure my parents would agree. I think I went off to university and they were thinking, I don't know what she's going to do, but your path is set in life and you'll find it at some stage. And I think this year everything's sort of starting to fit into place now, and I look back on my university days and I think I'm so glad I did it. And actually there's a lot of fun at the time and not an awful lot of at the time learning, I don't think, but there is a lot of things I look back on now, and if I hadn't have done that, there would have been choices that I would have made now that would have been wrong because I wouldn't have had that insight. So although everything changes, and you know, even the course that I did, it'll be completely different now, but doing the course with the flowers, it was excellent, and it just kind of it taught me so much. And then obviously the first year of growing taught me even more. And then, you know, you can read, but actually until you start doing it, it's really difficult, particularly for me. I learned so much by doing, and once you've done it and you've seen it happen, and you know, you read about some things and I think, oh right, yeah, that's nice, okay, and then I might forget about it, and then it happens and I'm like, oh, now I see what they mean. So yeah, and it's great because you can dip back in. You know, every year we get an option to pay a slight, like it's kind of almost like a membership, but to go back into that group, and it is useful. It has been useful because you can still dip in and out of what you've learned, and what other. It's also useful for things that other people are finding difficult. If you're finding something is failing this year, and it's really easy to just think it's all stuff that I've done wrong, but actually sometimes there is a reason, and everybody's finding the same thing in that year. You know, something particularly difficult to grow, and something within the, you know, environment that's making it more difficult, and it's good because you've kind of got that.
As you've said, the biggest learning, it comes from trial and error, doesn't it? You know, I know myself that, you know, you learn things about the wind and how that's going to affect what you plant where, and you learn things about timings and soil. And when you and I were having a conversation actually the other day, weren't we, about dahlias, and you know, do you dig them up or do you not dig them up, and different people can and can't, depends where in the country you are, and there's so many variables, and so you need to learn about your own farm and how and what you can grow in that particular kind of microclimate, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and one of the big things I've learned as well over the last couple of years, and it applies to farming as well, and maybe it makes me look on our farm a bit differently, is that there's a lot of chat over whether or not if you do wedding flowers and the bride and the bride's mother maybe want to come and see your flower patch, and what are you going to do? Are you going to let them come because it's a bit of a mess and they might think it's, a bit of a riot, and will it put them off buying your flowers because it's a riot? And it's a bit like, when people come to your house and you're like, oh, now I'm going to have to tidy up because we've got visitors coming, and whether you need that stress in your life. But I think the thing is how you manage your time and tasks that you do that are going to make you money. So weeding is the one big thing that everyone, it has to be done because it impedes the growth of flowers some of the time. I mean, I probably in the past I would have been someone who maybe obsessed over how tidy things were, but it's almost made me the complete opposite, because if it doesn't, if that 20 minutes is not going to help make the money come in, then really there's not an awful lot of point in doing it. So
well, and that is a very good point, because much as you love flowers, you're not just doing this for fun. This is a business, and it's sinking in with the farm. It's sinking in with the assets and the opportunities you've got. And I love how you were saying earlier that the dung from the cattle gets spread on the beds for the flowers, and it all forms part of a virtuous circle. And at the end of the day, you're producing Scottish grown flowers, but it is a business, so you've got to be conscious of what's making you money, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's so important, because we can't carry on. It's not sustainable to sell the flowers at a rate where you're not making anything to reinvest. So I'm really lucky that we have cows on the farm, because I don't use any flower food or anything like that.
No, that's fantastic.
We get I do get the soil samples done to test the beds to make sure they're all looking good, and that's always an interesting thing to do. Obviously we try and improve every year, put improvers in, so like it does sound a bit sort of crazy, but collecting up all the leaves that fall in the garden in the year and putting them back on the beds and over the winter, it does all kind of make a difference. And it's that you're not using synthetic anything for feeding or helping them to grow. In the last couple of years, actually, compost has been quite a difficult thing to sort of get your head around, because everyone's going peat free.
Yes,
it's a difficult one, because it's so frustrating, because sometimes I've tried so many different composts over the last 4 years, and last year was the most difficult year because everyone's going peat free. So even the stuff you get in garden centres now, and it's actually not very good, and I feel like the mainstream haven't absolutely nailed peat-free compost yet. So that's been a big learning curve, because I totally understand the need for peat-free, but it's that whole thing that the stuff we were able to get just wasn't doing what it needed to do. But yeah, good so far. But it's interesting. It's just all these things that you never really thought about before you started commercially growing.
Flowers, because I always digress. Some of it is essentially in your back garden, which must be super handy for keeping an eye on it. The rest is pretty close by. You've mentioned that you do sunflowers and sunflower afternoon teas. What other flowers do you grow? Tell us a bit about the different flowers, and ultimately what's kind of important for us to get across is how those flowers take part in all of the different offerings that you have for people to purchase from you.
We've got 5, 6, 7 beds of peonies, which 3 of the beds are only just kind of, I don't think I'll be able to take flowers from them this year, but I've got 2 or 3 beds that are 3rd year plants, so I should be able to get flowers from them this summer, which is really exciting, because I haven't been able to sell peonies before now.
They take about 3 years, don't they? Is that right, to mature? Yeah, they're one of my favourites.
They do,
peonies.
Yeah. To be able to cut from them. Yeah, no, me too. So I'm excited about them. I'm excited about what colour they're going to be, because I don't really know. You put in these tubers and you're not really sure what will come from them. So that's exciting for this year, and they'll be a highlight, I think, of our postal subscription flowers, or postal flowers in total. So yeah, that's exciting. Then the first flowers that will come this year will be tulips, but I've planted, I'm not sure how many tulips we planted this year, maybe half of what we did last year, mostly because they're lovely, I love them, but they are quite expensive to grow in comparison to all other flowers. So I love them because they're a bit of the start to the season, but I am trying to contain not going crazy with them, because otherwise I'll make no money. And you kind of need to sell, you know, like it's so difficult to tell. If you just could see into the future, it would be, we would commit to planting more of them. But way back when I first started this, we'd kind of thought we might have put them over to do pick your own tulips alongside the sunflowers. So we would have a rotation over at the steading. So we would go from tulips in spring to summer with sunflowers, and then autumn pumpkins. But you know this, it just it wasn't going to work because the financial just doesn't stack up for us to do that here. So it's fine. We've got them in the garden. Hopefully, last year I had the issue of pretty much every single tulip blooming at the same time, which was a nightmare. And I was like, oh my goodness, stop the bus. Look at the tulips. And I was like, you know, it was lovely to see them, but I was like, I'm so disappointed because they become unsaleable once they get to one, you know, and it wasn't out every single one, but they were there anyway. So that was the tulips last year. So I was trying to contain myself this year, not putting too many in, and hopefully we'll have it the right number. And then we've got, what else have we got? We've got Sweet William, which I've self-seeded from last year, which is quite exciting because this is the first year I've been able to take anything that doesn't just go straight back into the ground so through the winter. They're not looking amazing, but I guess nothing really looks amazing in February. So, and then we've got verbena, which has been really good over the years. We probably have too much of that actually, but I think I've become a bit of a garden hoarder. So I just I'm like, I should probably take some of that out and I don't know, maybe give it away, but then I don't know.
It's like you just never know. You might need it.
You just never know. Yeah, I might need that one day. We've got them, and then other spring things that will come up will be the alliums. I planted loads of them in the first year, so they just kind of work away themselves. And then last year we spent some time putting roses and alströmera down the bottom of the garden, which is kind of against a wall. So what have I got in the greenhouse? I'm just going round to the greenhouse now. I don't have loads in here at the moment, but I had a bit of a worry this morning because this is us only into week number 2 of sowing, and we had a quite hard frost last night. And when I looked out this morning, I had moved yesterday some trays of seeds out of the greenhouse and then out of the propagator, which is in the polytunnel, and into the greenhouse, and I thought that'd be fine. I've got a sort of fan thing in here that sits on a sort of frost setting that I only just turned on because I'd moved these in. And then I looked out this morning and I was like, oh no, the top half of the greenhouse was all frozen, and the bottom half, where I'd left the fan on the floor, so the bottom kind of waist down was all clear and the top half was all frosty. But as it turned out, I don't know, I mean, they look okay, and the inside wasn't cold when I opened the door.
Good, so they were all right.
I don't know. It might have done its job. I hope so. So we've got some stalks in here, which is really exciting because I absolutely love them. They are another kind of first of the year annual.
Which one was that, did you say?
Frilly stalks. So they're kind of, I suppose they're kind of like a frillier version of an antilinum. You would recognise them because they are very popular. They're very popular in the supermarkets as kind of like a single variety flower at the start of probably June. They'll come end of May, start of June. So we've got stalks. Did some poppies last week. We did some sweet peas just for a bit of bee attraction. I can't sell sweet peas in my postal flowers, so I decided to rein it in with sweet peas this year. I reined it in last year, but we still managed to have quite a few of them. So they're nice to have, and they are sort of a nice pollinator.
Tell me, when it comes to actually buying the flowers, how does it work? I know you do sell wholesale for weddings and to florists, but you also, members of the public can buy from you direct as well. So tell us a little bit about how that works, because people who are listening to this on the day or soon after it is broadcast, will know that Mother's Day is looming, and so they may wish to know more about how they can buy some amazing Scottish flowers from you.
Yeah. So, well, basically, we currently have a website it's not an ideal website. We're kind of in the process of developing another one. But for the meantime, we have a website. It is a website for the farm, and then within that website there is parts for the pumpkins and for the wild acre. So I think if you search Corrimony Farm, CORRIMONY, and then farm. So that's Corrimony Farm, and on there you could buy a one-off bunch of flowers, or you can buy a subscription, which is the regular delivery. You can either opt to have fortnightly delivery or monthly delivery for 3 or 6 months, and usually, so you can choose when your subscription starts. So in terms of delivery, this year we're really trying to kind of tailor and tweak the postal service. So we haven't really fully operated the postal service as such before. We've had a few trials and customers that had bought them, and we fulfilled that, but up until now we've not done large bulk delivery of postal flowers, but we have done local delivery. So local delivery is basically just we fill the van and then I go out and deliver it, and that's actually a really, really lovely job.
I bet. Yeah, you're delivering joy to people's doorsteps. Yes. That's so nice.
I know, it's really nice, and it's lovely. It's a really nice job to have, and especially here, and because most of the deliveries are actually rural, because I guess people can't get that anywhere else, and therefore it's actually beautiful. I get to go to some of the most amazing locations, and areas. It's always quite exciting because I think, somebody will say, I want to order flowers for this friend, but I'm not entirely sure what address is. But then they'll send me like a pin on a Google map, and they're like, I'm not sure how you actually get into her house because there's all these drives. So it's sent on a wild goose chase. But I do quite enjoy that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, the postal service is where we want to channel our focus our mind this year, because it's what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get the production up a little, the orders up, so that we can really make it a viable prospect to continue doing it and be able to supply across the UK. Really, there's large companies that are doing it sustainably, in inverted commas, and actually I don't know if you can truly trust that they know who and who's growing the flowers and what is being put on the flowers. I said earlier, we don't feed our flowers anything. I don't spray them with anything. The reason that imported flowers last so long is because they've been treated, right, with some sort of chemicals. Yes. And those are not chemicals you really want to be working with if you can help it. And I think it totally takes all of the natural goodness away from the fact it's a grown natural thing to then go and spray it with loads of chemicals.
I know.
So ours aren't, and I think it's a unique selling point. I think it's we're small, we're Scottish, we're local employment, and my dream would be to grow and grow where we can generate more employment in our area, and particularly our local schools in real declining numbers. Our children actually might be some of the last to be able to go there, and that would be so sad, and I think it's trying to keep people in the area, these rural areas, and good jobs is what keeps people in an area, and I think if we could keep growing the business to it's one of the aims of the business is to provide good jobs, and it's not just providing jobs, but providing good jobs and jobs that will last. It's not about just employing someone for the short term and getting us through a busy period or whatever. It's about making the business sustainable so that we all can have a good life from this business, and that's really important to us.
So there you have it, a brilliant idea for Mother's Day. So if you've got a mum or a wife or any other lady in your life who needs a bit of a treat, then pop onto Barbara's website and subscribe to her amazing Scottish grown flowers. That's pretty much it for this week, but before I go, I obviously want to thank our sponsor for this episode. So that's Scottish legal firm Gillespie McAndrew, who, as you will have noticed, are long-term sponsors and supporters of the podcast. So as ever, we are extremely grateful to them. Either Monty or myself will be back again next week, and we'll look forward to it.